Welcome to CAM Radio, an Ahead of the Curve initiative by Cyril Mangaldas, bringing you every Friday the latest in legal and policy. Stay tuned. Enjoy listening.
So, good afternoon, Justice Gautam Patel. Wonderful to have you on CAM Radio. It's been just a little over a month since you stepped down after a distinguished career in the judiciary, and we are privileged to have you here today on the CAM Radio podcast show. So, looking forward to the rest of this conversation, and I have essentially 3 or 4 broad topics to talk about, but here goes. First and foremost, let me start with just the role of judiciary in economic growth. And I remember a conversation you and I had several years ago when one of the things that we were exploring was that the judiciary is not just some institution which sits in isolation, but in the development of a nation, the judiciary is also an instrument of economic policy. And we've seen that play out in many situations. We've seen it playing out on how the judiciary has intervened in a constitutional review of economic policies in terms of licenses for exploitations of minerals, for tax cases, and so on and so forth. And the globe also, when they're looking at investing in India, does look at what is the state of the rule of law in India. We pride ourselves in terms of having a better rule of law than most other emerging or growing economies, but it always comes with a caveat of your rule of law is great, but by the way, there are delays in the system. So I'll stop over there and would love to get your thoughts in a kind of a free flow mode in terms of what you see in terms of how the country is moving forward now. We aim to be a $55 trillion economy in another 2 decades, which is a huge leap that we will take. And what role is the legal system and the judiciary in particular going to play in that? So with these remarks, over to you.
Cyril, thank you for having me here on CAM Radio. It's a privilege. I have followed some of the previous episodes, not all of them. Some remarkable insights there. The question that you raise is, I think, of seminal significance and importance. And I'm saying this from 2 different perspectives. You take the question of the rule of law and the position of the judiciary in the context of a constitutional framework, and particularly in the context of Part 3 and the fundamental rights. Now, that is one aspect of the matter. And whether our courts have been consistent and have been entirely successful in the protection, upholding of the rights is perhaps a discussion for another day. But I don't think that anyone will quarrel with the proposition that but for the judiciary and for judicial interventions over a historical period of time, and we can even go back to Keshavananda Bharati or behind that, the framing of protections is largely court-driven. It's there in the Constitution, but to give it a shape and an effective shape and an effective force has always come and has always been driven by the courts. When it comes to the economy, now this is counterintuitive. Took me personally a fairly long time to come to this realization, and I'm not sure that all judges across the country, in fact, share this view. I'm sure, in fact, there are many who don't. The impression is that commercial disputes, and let's just focus on those, are something of an indulgence. And I've begun to question this. The result of this approach is that commercial disputes are often relegated to the back burner. An exceptional court in this has consistently been, over the last 10 years, the Delhi High Court, which has found ways, innovative ways, and methods to prioritize the disposal of commercial disputes. Now, instinctively, as a judge, your reaction is, oh, let's help that poor person, the teacher who's fighting for a pension, or for release of salary. And the guy who's talking about commercial disputes is only money and it's only interest, but that can wait. But money has a carrying cost. And it has a cost beyond the actual interest cost because it affects everything, including the impression of how business can effectively be done in a country like India. I think if you're at all at a policy level, going to talk about the ease of doing business, which is a phrase that government after government loves trotting out and flinging in the judiciary's face, without itself doing very much to simplify that process, you have to see commercial disputes in a different light. Commercial disputes really have an origin. You have a commercial contract, and a firm like Cyril CAM will begin by putting in a bunch of dispute avoidance clauses. You foresee that there will be a dispute, but these are the mechanisms that we contractually have to resolve those disputes before they go to a court or to an arbitration. When that system doesn't yield a result, you wind up in some dispute resolution forum, whether it's a court or an arbitration. It is at this point that you have to change your perspective and say, look, these matters should not be allowed to clog up the system. They take an extraordinary amount of time because the stakes are such, complexities are such, legal issues are such. Get rid of them as fast as possible, resolve them as fast as possible, and free up the time, the judicial time, for all the other work. If you don't do this, what actually begins to happen is that there is a pile up of commercial cases waiting for resolution, and they begin to clog the system. At some point, they come in the way, so you can't even get to that other non-commercial case that you need to get. Now, how do we do this? 2 or 3 concrete things. The Bombay High Court hasn't done this. There are reasons for it. So this is not in that sense of criticism. The Commercial Courts Act has timelines. The Delhi High Court has hammered down those timelines very rigidly. That works because then people know the rules of the game at the outset of a commercial litigation. If you keep it lax and if you keep it fluid, people will take a chance on a commercial litigation. That should not be allowed to happen. You need a dedicated infrastructure that deals with commercial cases, and to the extent possible, a team of dedicated courts, maybe 1, 2, whatever you can spare, which aren't actually tasked with doing non-commercial litigation simultaneously and having to make these priority decisions. If you achieve this, I think 2 or 3 things will begin to happen. Look at it from the point of view of a potential foreign investor coming into the country. One of the questions that that person is going to ask, perhaps at the tail end of a discussion on the contract, is that if there is a dispute, am I going to be stuck for 10 years in your legendary dispute resolution system? If you are able, they'll compare you, for example, to China and will say, look, in China, there is this arbitration resolution tribunal or court. I'll go there and within days, they will give me a result. The answer has to be that, but that result may be a result that is extremely non-democratic and is in a system that is unfamiliar to you. When things don't go according to plan, what's your solution be is the question that they will ask. And the answer is the court. But then the question is that the court must be able and must have a track record of being able to deliver that result on time. If you can do this, you will immediately, I think, begin to foster the foreign investment in the country. Foreign investment requires 2 or 3 things. It requires a physical infrastructure in a city.
Not just foreign investors, even
Any
some of
investor.
us Indian investors are actually investing even more money. So they have the same need.
They have the same need, but I would say that, okay, let me put it like this. You can't park a German investor in a dry state and expect him to last there for 10 days.
Yes.
You're going to have to do something about this. You're going to have, it's part of his infrastructure building. He wants a nightlife. He wants a certain lifestyle. He wants ease of transportation networks. He wants stable power connections. He wants a high quality internet. He wants good workable workspaces. Now, these are infrastructure things that we can build. But the judicial system for dispute resolution has to be seen as an integral part of that infrastructure building. You can't separate it out and then say, well, now go back to that age-old creaking system. It needs an overhaul.
In one of the recent interviews that I had done, one of my guests actually said, if you want to make in India, you also have to figure out how to resolve in India. And
Correct.
unless you resolve in India, you won't be able to make it.
So the other problem that, well, there are two other problems that I see here. One is that we have a track record of consistently inconsistent decision making.
Yes.
That has to stop. The
Absolutely.
only thing that we're
Very
consistent on is in our inconsistency. You can't keep swinging the pendulum because this is severely damaging to the psyche of any corporate, domestic or international. You don't know where you stand. You can't keep shifting the goalposts. You have to get this done correctly. And the second aspect is you have to assure the winning party that your enforcement and recovery will happen without delay and effectively.
But on a lighter note, if I can ask you, why is it that we have so much inconsistency in India? Is it just the argumentative Indian, or is it just the nature of our constitutional structure?
No, I don't think it's the nature of the constitution, and the argumentative Indian is about the same level as the litigious American. So I don't think there's much to choose between the two of them. The problem is that we haven't looked at our processes and found ways to smoothen those processes and iron out the wrinkles. Now, I think our Arbitration Act, and I've been saying this for the last 2 or 3 years, needs a very serious makeover. From its fundamental concepts onwards, in fact, Section 7, according to me, needs to be rewritten. The Commercial Courts Act, that compulsory mediation, pre-mediation to all commercial cases needs to be tweaked savagely. Because, okay, let's look at it like this. In fact, I was in London last year and I mentioned this and Hoffman started laughing. In a check bouncing case, what is there to mediate? Are you going to pay me no interest? Are you going to pay me less than the principal amount of the check? What is there to mediate?
Mediate, exactly.
You can't send it in this blindsided fashion into mediation. It needs calibration, and that hasn't happened.
It reminds me of Justice Pensay's court many years ago. He used to start literally with what installments?
What installments, which is,
yeah.
And I'll tell you, this is not a great secret. So Justice Shriram and I used to have this friendly competition not about who could impose more costs, but who could actually make the borrower deposit the amount faster.
Yeah.
So when somebody said, okay, we'll take our chance in the other court, I once said, but it's a question of which is the frying pan and which is the fire. I can tell you for sure that Justice Shriram is going to do the same thing that I'm going to do. If you've borrowed money, deposit it, then we'll hear you. We won't have the bank running helter-skelter trying to recover if you lose. At which point, the borrower backs off because there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go. But, you take an example like Section 7 of our Arbitration Act. Now, this has become what I'm calling the opt-in clause for arbitration. Why don't we jump this and rethink this from the ground up and start on the presumption that if two parties have entered into a commercial contract as defined under the Commercial Contracts Act, their preferred dispute resolution mode is arbitration. They have to opt out. The consensus at IDEM will be to opt out. The law can fictionalize this, that in a commercial contract, unless you opt out, your chosen dispute resolution mode is arbitration. Half a dozen of these arguments under Section 11 will go flying out of the window. The stamp duty questions will go flying out of the window. All of this will begin to happen. There's a colossal amount of time that is being spent, judicial time that is being spent on what is essentially a sideshow.
I agree.
Essentially a sideshow. But we need to rejig our...
What the country needs now, looking at the journey ahead, or what they call the Amrit Kal from now till 2047, of where India is going to become the second or third largest economy in the world. And it's not going to happen unless we have a legal system to match. Now, you used a term a few moments ago on process re-engineering, and that part of how you see the problem is because our processes are outdated. Our processes are designed for inefficiency, and our processes are probably one of the principal causes for why our justice system has been bogged down. If you had a magic wand, what would you do in terms of redesigning the process?
First, well, two or three things. First of all, I'd have to explain to somebody what we mean by process creation. It's a lovely phrase. We borrowed it from God knows where. You can't fling
A
it,
management consultant.
or whatever. You can't fling it at a district judge and then say, do process re-engineering, leaving him or her completely befuddled. What they then try and do is to tweak an existing provision rather than looking at an overall, the whole system. A very good example to follow is the English legal reforms process that resulted in the White Book and all the rest of that at the end of this. When they completely rejigged the manner in which court processes began to happen. Now, it requires two things. I'll tell you what it doesn't require. It does not require judges to spend their time doing this. It's actually not their brief. You need a well-equipped third-party agency that understands systems and processes. The judges have to work with these people to define what our processes are, to define the bottlenecks and the choke points, and let
So
them
fresh of eyes, which
And
are
let-
not colored by the existing
That's
system.
correct. Because many of us are so, well, brainwashed is an awful word, but we are so indoctrinated into accepting this that it's become status quo, Cyril. And that's something that needs to. The other aspect to this is that there is a complete lack of standardization. Now, a key to an efficient system is that you must have standardization of processes and formats. There's an interesting background. So 15 years ago, we received 20 years, we received some communication. Justice Ribello was in the Bombay High Court saying, rewrite your High Court rules so that they are consistent. And the mission was to make a set of rules for courts across the country that were consistent. That project, I don't know what happened. It seems to have fallen by the wayside. In the Bombay High Court, we began a project to unify the appellate and the original side rules. That is still pending, but a lot of work was done on that. But I'm saying that the processes for, let us take writ petitions, the single largest segment of filing in any high court in the country, must be standard whether you are Delhi, Calcutta, Madras, Telangana, Bombay. It makes no difference. Even the Supreme Court's processes, find one standardized process and use that. The forms must be standardized. Today, it's so chaotic that
Even in the same city, you can have two courts having differences.
And it is in fact different between Bombay and Pune. A civil suit on the original side of the Bombay High Court.
Completely.
Civil suit in Thane are dealt with entirely different. This should not be the case. Look at our High Court websites. They are completely non-standard. The search mechanisms are different from court to court to court. And there is one court I remember because I went, it was a nightmare. They have some 8-digit alphanumeric CAPTCHA code which pops at you every 30 seconds. And it was impossible to navigate a website like this. And the Supreme Court uses 4 numerals. Very easy to do. Now the Supreme Court has given the simple answer, 2 + 2 equals, put in the answer, and you're through.
So just like ease of doing business, ease of navigating the legal system is also definitely one of the key parts of how we should look at this issue.
Well, let me tell you the vision of the e-courts project as I understood it from its very early manifestation, which is that there would be a digital grid from the point of the court of first instance to the Supreme Court. And at every level, there would be a link so that you could go up and down the hierarchy as you liked and find every order and every document at every stage. Now, if you pull that off, it's actually marvelous.
Yes.
Because from the point of filing to an internal appeal to the High Court to the Supreme Court, you can trace the entire life cycle of a litigation. Any person, any litigant, I'm not talking only about a commercial litigant now, any litigant would benefit enormously from being able to have and access openly a system like this. It's
Absolutely. If I can now move on to a different topic on, and it kind of builds a little bit on what you just said, is on technology. And but I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle. So if I can quote Professor Richard Susskind, and who has kind of raised this issue but not yet fully answered it, is justice a place or justice is a service? And I think just to elaborate on that, so that it not doesn't sound too abstract, is there are conventional notions and our kind of almost default thinking is that for getting justice you have to go to a place, a court, a beautiful court like the Mumbai High Court or wherever else, and that is where you literally knock on the doors of justice and you get justice as well. It's different matter that it may take long, but if you were to rethink our concept of justice as really a service that the state provides to its citizens, and then rethinks about the modalities of what are the tools that it will use in order to provide that service. Can it use AI? Can it use other forms of experts as well? But it's a sovereign function of the state to provide justice to its citizen. And once you make that, no country has yet done it, but many countries are thinking about it. That once you start thinking about it as a service and that your citizen is your customer, you then have a very different kind of mindset. What would be your thoughts on this idea and how we can apply it to India? If we really start as a nation, start thinking about providing justice as a service to the citizens, what changes will it bring in our thinking?
But this, I think, requires a radical change in thought, and I think COVID gave us the answer.
Yeah.
Because COVID was unprecedented in 1,000 different ways. But 2 or 3 things emerge from this. One is that when the physical systems fail and the destinations, that the halls of the courts of law were no longer available to you, there was a plan B, and it worked. And it worked effectively. We experimented with Zoom, which we're on this now. We experimented with WebEx. The Supreme Court had its own thing. It didn't matter. The point is that was, to my mind, a watershed moment where we moved from being a destination to being a service provider. Whether we accept the phrase or not, that defined it. And I think Justice Chandrachud has been saying this directly and indirectly for some period of time. I mean, after all, when the Chief Justice of India says, look, we must have hybrid facilities in every court, it's to give people the option, the freedom of choice, both the litigant and the lawyer. Underlying this is the concept that justice is not a destination. The concept of the temple of justice is one that got smashed in COVID, because it's now become a movable temple or a temple on wheels or a movable feast, because wherever you are, justice will be available to you from wherever you are. You don't need to actually travel to the temple. The temple is available to you at your doorstep in a digital form. But let me, as an aside, tell you something that I've been worried about while chairing the computer committee of the High Court, which is that we have no plan C. Which is it's a very serious concern, Cyril. We are now so totally dependent on our computer and digital systems that if there is a concerted attack or a failure or a breakdown or a disaster, our courts will shut down. You will not get a daily list. You will not get the papers. You will not be able to upload orders. And we haven't really, this is what a process engineering consultant would tell you. What are you going to do if your main center and hub of operations is in any way compromised? I can't afford more than a 30-minute delay, and 30 minutes is 29 minutes too long.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to be up and running at the flip of a switch. Now, the Delhi High Court has a disaster management recovery center somewhere in central India in a non-seismic zone. That's perhaps one solution, but this has actually become scary. We need invasive audits with ethical hackers to see how closely protected our systems are, because we can't go back to a physical system. That's behind us now. You're not going back to the printing, hard copy printing of daily lists anymore.
Yes,
You
yes,
conceive it, sir. It's not going to happen. You want it on your mobile phone, you want it on your laptop, you want it on your iPad. You want the entire case record on your iPad. They're not going back to
right.
it. So,
No, I think in terms of technology, I think a lot of things have moved. But yes, I just as you rightly pointed out, there are still work to be done. But let me be a little bit more self-critical. And I've had this conversation with the professor, and he's always always self-criticizing his own theories. And he makes a distinction, and I think a valid one, between between automation and the use of technology. So this exact thing. He says, yeah, Zoom is great, Teams is great, WebEx is great, all of this stuff is fine. But what is it? It's automation. It is basically a communication technology. When and what would be the tipping point where we can say justice is now a service, where the state provides it in terms of just how you get any other service, like a medical service or any other service which the state, like a transportation service. At what point will it get? What will it take to make sure that justice is a similar service that is provided, and it's not just having more modern tools of automation.
Good.
Automation is a step along the way, but I think that is it's still not the destination.
well, look at it from the perspective of a litigant. Look, there are services and there are services. We are not a manufacturing service. This is not like making plastic buckets. Every litigant will want a bespoke.
But it's such a deeply felt human service. I mean, everybody wants justice.
Service, but it is unlike a service like buying an airline or a railway ticket. Now, that's a one-off thing, and it doesn't require you to have that level of customization to be custom tailored to the facts of that particular case. The litigant wants to be heard by a human being.
Yes, the right to human justice.
The right to human justice, the litigant wants to go not just to a court, but to a judge in a court. And
wants a just outcome. What is perception is at least a just process.
That's right. And that judge will apply a process. Now, the automation must happen at the level of what I call the mechanical or the donkey work part of it.
Yeah.
Which is the filing, the compliance with the filing. The standardization of all of this must and can be automated. Take the simplest example. CAM files a fresh lawsuit or a writ petition. It goes automatically through a process of checking for requirements and compliances and automatically finds itself listed without requiring CAM to send a junior to mention the matter to get it listed.
Yes.
This level of automation, I agree. But
So
then point at which
on the right track. So we have achieved a fair amount on automation. I think the next step will be reimagining justice as a service.
The actual fashioning of justice as a service to automate it, I think would be extremely difficult. I think it would be still extremely difficult. The access to the judge can be more easily provided remotely.
Yeah.
But I think that every litigant, even your most hardened corporate litigant, Cyril, is bound to say, I want the judge to hear what I have to say to my counsel.
No, I mean, the fact that natural justice should be followed, there should be a human being at the end of the process who delivers that judgment. I think those are all par for the course. But there can be a lot that can be done along the journey till we get there where it becomes not only a service, but becomes an efficient service. And
but let me take an example, Cyril, from what is undoubtedly one of your portfolio matters, and I'm being generic about this. Challenge an order and say, look, it's an unreasoned order. And the other side says, no, but there are reasons. But you say, but those reasons aren't really reasons or aren't sufficient reasons. Can't automate this. You need the judge to figure out whether what Cam is saying is correct or is not correct.
Yeah.
And that's not going to lend itself to a mechanized process.
But I don't want to underestimate the impact of artificial intelligence and the speed at which it is moving. There are several examples where AI has already crossed or is about to cross and tip over into becoming more powerful than human intelligence, and it will be able to spot a lot of this. But that's a conversation for another day.
No, it's not. Actually, I'll tell you, this is I don't know whether it's a dream scenario or a nightmare scenario, but let's take this one. CAM files a petition. It has its in-house AI team, which plugs in the parameters, and one of the parameters is that this matter is going to be listed before Patel J, who has been extensively profiled by the system. And
Yes.
that system will then return a predictive answer that, there's a 95% chance that Patel will toss you out and a 100% chance that he will impose costs.
Yes. So this already exists. This is data analytics.
So you know that
this already exists. In fact, there is in the US there is the pinball machine, almost Moneyball.
Moneyball.
The litigation finance is based on these predictive reports.
Predictive analysis. And with profiling, this is something judges are going to hate. But there's not much they can do.
This is already there. We don't talk about it.
You take the body of work and you'll find a pattern.
Yeah.
You'll find a pattern.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of the litigant, the nature of the counterparty, the judge, the nature of the issue, within seconds to get predictive outcomes.
Correct.
So this is, I don't know whether it's very sort of almost dystopian thing. Imagine these scenarios, but
saying that there'll be a robot dressed as a human being in black robes that's going to squawk out a judgment for you, I would resist that.
Yeah, of course, no, but I don't want to go that far. But probably there are a lot of steps along the way which can be thought of as a service. Like even in medicine, yes, you have the final act or the final, giving you that prescription is done by a human doctor. But along the way, technology has changed so much.
Completely. And the way that they're doing very deep brain and neuro and heart surgery with robotics and with
and across the world, there are medical applications where doctors are sitting in India and conducting through the net operations in the US and vice versa. Now, let me move to the last and final section of today's chat is about the professions. And there are many parts to our profession. First is, of course, the advocacy bar, then the commercial and corporate bar and law firms like us as well. And then younger lawyers and apprentices and others. So each of these has kind of issues. Now, in a recent interview that I gave, one of the kind of request that I made is that this whole profession requires almost a drastic remaking over. We are not fit for purpose for where the country is headed. We're sitting in some Dickensian time warp, and that needs to be kind of shaken up in terms of making it much more fit for the future. So there are various parts to it on the entire opening up of the market for foreign law firms, the stance that at least I believe in, and this conversation has evolved over the last 20, 30 years, is that this is high time that it should be done. Similarly, I have some thoughts in relation to how the advocacy bar should be reimagined as well. So, our best traditions of our advocacy bar have been drawn from the UK system, but we forget that the UK system itself has evolved multiple times over. The concept of how chambers are run, and chambers have their clerks, and their entire system is effectively run in a very professional, not that the chambers over here are not, but it's run in a very different way, which is much more fit for. You get a real apprenticeship model for a young barrister joining and making his way up to a silk. So that is one model. The other model is the American model, where the guy who sits and argues before the judge actually belongs in a firm as well. So there are multiple models globally available. But one thing which is clear is that the model that we have today is definitely not going to get us there. And it is a part of the problem in terms of what we are facing in terms of speedy justice or the lack of it. And linked with that, of course, is one of your favorite topics, which is that the training and apprenticeship model is broken completely. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this. This whole series of themes is very close to my heart, and it's people like you and me who will have to drive the change.
I'll tell you, Cyril, this is a very difficult question, and I think some of the issues are probably upsetting to anybody who believes in status quo. Now, I'm not 100% sure that a foreign model necessarily needs to be copy pasted here. In fact, copy pasting is one of the things that bedevils our system from the beginning. Junior barristers in London often have to struggle a very great deal to get ahead in their careers, and there's much less work than there used to be. I have mixed feelings about this. I'll tell you why. Take a large firm. Yours is one. There will be several others. Typically, the briefing tends to be of the super senior, then there's a second tier senior, there's a third tier senior, and there's the fourth tier, who I like to call the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas in the making, the about to be seniors. Not yet designated, but getting there. Below this, the council bar has been almost entirely substituted by in-house advocates from the firms. Obviously, from the perspective of client servicing and cost management. I understand the need to do this, but we are doing ourselves a disservice because there is a need to foster, mentor that bar that is tomorrow going to be at the fourth tier, third tier, second tier, and top tier. In the
And go to the bench.
and go to the bench in the next 20 or 30 years. We are doing ourselves a disservice because you are going to have people not looked at for judgeship because their careers have not taken off. And that's for want of briefing. Now, when you and I began, we began with these small applications that today typically law firms are making in-house through their own counsel. Obviously, but this needs a review.
Yes.
This needs a sectoral review. Are others in the sector with you on this? I don't. There is also, I think, something of a mismatch, and I don't know whether this is generational or meaning not just limited to law or is particular about generations, but there is a mismatch in the expectations of large law firms, even mid-sized law firms, and those who are entering the law firms. I am seeing repeatedly, and they pop up once in a while in the, was your image was frozen. Did that audio?
No, I don't know. I mean, yours was frozen over here. So maybe you want to just rewind and then we'll just add the snippet up.
So I was just saying that there seems to be a mismatch in the expectations.
Yes.
The expectations of entrance into law firms and those who are heading the law firms. And those lead to points of, I think, quite unnecessary friction. The familiar topic for us is this whole question of mental health. It's not a trivial question. It is a serious question. It's one that has gained recognition now. But on the one hand, you have a law firm's expectation of a certain quality of work. And when that quality isn't met,
and quantity, both.
Quality and quantity audit, both. If that is not met, what then should be an appropriate response from the law firm and the expectation of the entrant who's doing the work, saying that, okay, I may have goofed up, but that's not the way to deal with me. Now, I'm not seeing anybody having a conversation. I'm only seeing the flare-ups. I don't know whether in-house within the firms, you have space, you make space and time for these conversations in a non-adversarial, non-antagonistic environment. And I think that's important to the growth of the firms and the growth of the youngsters in the firms. That's a conversation that really needs to happen. And the third thing is this, that I think that our legal educational system has spectacularly failed us, especially post-COVID, in the training of younger advocates and their preparedness to get into the real early, rough and tumble of a litigation.
Yes.
Documentation is something that a firm will be able to handle in-house. The courts play no role in this. But when it comes to courts, and that's where law is often shaped, that's the tip of the spear, you must have, and I think this must come as an initiative from the law firms, not to set up more law colleges, because that has its own set of problems. Not to redo the courses that law colleges are doing. Acknowledge them as founding as providing the necessary foundation, but structured, in a structured place. And I'm saying multi-denominational, so not limited to a one firm. Many firms coming together to provide, what's the word for it? Toolkits, necessary, essential toolkits. Litigation.
No, it's almost like a finishing school, almost like a post-university.
What would be an appropriate litigation strategy, and how would you construct a cross-examination? And what are the secrets to constructing it? You find this very often. Cross-examination is conducted without a plan. And then from the rubble of this evidence, somebody is trying to create a defense.
Okay.
It's exactly the other way around. But this, the book will not teach.
Yes.
This,
But
the
this,
law college
isn't
will
this
not
hardcore apprenticeship? Really?
That's the hardcore apprenticeship. And it needs to be taught
Yes.
and then experienced. The problem is that our opportunities for experience are now diminished so much that there is
No,
no
you make a
chance.
valid point that the educational system has a lot to answer for.
It's an overbroad question. I think many of there are colleges where students are doing well despite the law college, not because of it. There are other law colleges that are doing a great job. Actually, they're doing a great job. I think Nalsa is doing a phenomenal job. Some of the bigger colleges, Jindal is doing a very, very good job. There are many, these are just two examples. There are many across the country.
No, and I agree with you. There are lots of, but I think from the point of apprenticeship model and some of the issues, the softer issue that you raise, I think the question to be asked is that something which you get at the university level?
No, you can't.
It's almost like a post-university, apprenticeship model where you pick up all of this.
Well, okay, so let me give you, this is a thought. If we were to do, for example, a course on trials,
Yes.
I would take them through the Evidence Act, but at some point I'd spring this surprise on them. I'd give them a brief. One of them would be a witness. There would be a plaintiff's counsel team. There would be somebody else cross-examining. And there would be one of them judging it, and I would judge the lot.
Yeah.
Now, this is the only way
that you can actually learn.
that they're going to see that this is a case that I've taken to trial as a practicum. So a day-long session or a half-day-long session saying, okay, don't file affidavits of evidence, lead the evidence as you would in a court, because from this you will learn how to draft your evidence affidavits.
Yeah.
And now cross-examine, and you, Madam Judge, better control this trial.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching you.
Yeah. No, this sounds fascinating, and I think you just kind of volunteered yourself into one of these.
I'm very good at volunteering myself for things that are way, way, way beyond my skill sets, but still.
So you mentioned Madam Judge, and I think one of the things which I had planned for today's topic is really the role of women in the advocacy bar as well. And one of the observations has been that there are too few women. Any quick thoughts on that before we close?
Actually, I disagree. There are lots and lots of women. In fact, in my internship crowd, which is running close to 90, I would say 90% are young ladies, and they've been phenomenal. So I don't think there's a shortage of people entering the profession. I think the biases in the profession really
I agree with you.
Need to be jettisoned, and they manifest themselves in all kinds of ugly ways, including in my court when I've had to berate someone for being completely condescending to a lady lawyer on the other side for no reason at all, except gender. I mean, that's unacceptable.
Completely.
That's completely unacceptable.
I should let you know that as a firm, we are more than 60% women, and with including a senior leadership position. So, I mean, I come from that space. But this is the many strands in today's conversation, which I think we can pick up in several further cam radio shows. I think you're going to be a regular, if I can, I can say that.
As long as we have Zoom.
So just a few rapid fire questions just to.
Now listen, come on. Now this is not coffee with Karan. So this is
this is coffee with Gautam.
This is not even chai with Cyril. So don't do this.
But I think there's always a human angle that I like at the end of it. So you've just stepped down from the bar. So, what are from the bench? What are you most looking forward to now in terms of, not only professionally but personally?
Personally, controlling my time, being able to say no without feeling guilty and for no reason at all. It's not, it's a luxury because it's not something I've ever have been able to do for the last 11 years. So that's one thing. Professionally, we'll see where it goes. It doesn't really matter. But there's a lot more.
You're going to be in fun because you come with exceptional insight and intellect. So that's one thought. Okay, favorite travel destinations? Are you going to travel a lot?
God, yes, and favorite, way too many. That bucket list is currently running at 3 pages and climbing. So let's not even go there.
There is not favorite. So then it's kind of into an inventory.
Everything. Eternally curious, so always willing to go in search of something different.
I agree. Would you write a book, biography?
About myself?
Yes.
Almost certainly not.
Almost certainly not. And a lot of people would be interested in knowing about you.
No, I'd write about other things, perhaps. I mean, thoughts, views, perspectives.
Yeah, I'm going to think of a few topics on which we can maybe co-author a few things as well.
But
that'll be fun. Favorite food?
Again, there you don't want to don't go down that road because just about
pick one.
Pick one. Why?
Favorite? I would say Gujarati for myself.
No. Gujarati. I mean, I love my Gujarati food, but a continental dish any day of Gujarati.
Favorite movie in recent times?
That's the odd thing. Till April, I don't think I was able to sit through a movie entirely or even a full series of shows. But I binge watched Ripley because I've always loved Patricia Highsmith's books. And this one, shot in black and white with that love of photography and so on, was just absolutely gorgeous. So that's the one I've enjoyed recently. And I must say, I just love that Dimple Kapadia Saas Bahu or Flamingo thing, which I thought was completely wacky, and I just loved it. It was mad stuff. Really loved it.
Okay. So on that delightful note, maybe I'll bring an end to this session. But
thank you.
Promise you, this is one of those to be continued.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gautam.
Thanks a lot.